Well, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so seems everyone is in place and we're good to go. This is the last part of the day and maybe the most interesting one. So we have some very interesting people who are going to be talking decentralization and data, and you were here, so we will just pick up where we left off basically. So moderating Jonathan Holby from Hub of All Things, and our panelists Ruben Fairberg, who you've just met previously, and on the other side we have Sebastian Hellman, who's the CEO of DBpedia. They're working on something called the DBpedia database, which is kind of decentralized, and DBpedia is one of the biggest data hubs anyway, so very relevant. And on that side, Andre Garcia, who's a Mozilla tech speaker, and he has also been working on decentralization, on something, building actually a Mozilla plugin for a decentralized network, which is called Scuttlebutt. So, I will cut my part right here and hand over to Jonathan, who can take over.
Thank you very much. I'll sort of introduce the panel topic very quickly, and then I'll pass it over to the panelists for a little bit more about each of the projects that you guys are working on in your own words. Whether we call this sort of the semantic web or linked data, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, his vision never really caught on amongst users and developers. And although part of this vision is about decentralization, and this is something that a few people are working on, semantic web technology remains largely underutilized. In this panel, we're going to explore a little bit about how the semantic web and decentralization can help each other. And I wonder if each of you would maybe like to take a minute, perhaps starting with you, Ruben, to talk a little bit just about the project that you're working on at the moment. The panel, the sort of piece that you just gave obviously gives a great deal of depth about the solid project and other things like that, but is there other stuff that you want to call attention to quickly?
So simply said, my research is about large numbers of small sources. And this is, I think, why, or an important reason why semantic web never really caught on, because there was no necessity. Like, if you can do big data, by all means do big data, but if things are in one place, they don't have all those problems. However, the moment you cannot bring data together, you get problems about decentralized agreements and so on. So I think that changing circumstances will shed a new light on semantic web-like technologies. And looking at all the people here, I'm sure that it is starting to catch on, at least just a little.
Sebastian, what are you working on?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'm from Leipzig, but I'm actually neither research nor industry, because my role here, also the community of DBpedia, we have a role as engineers, and which means we take scientific input and we produce the industrial output. So it really swings both ways between academia and industry. So DBpedia was one of the first working knowledge graphs where the whole decentralized linked data cloud crystallized around 13 years ago, actually. Now, decentralization is always two-way thing, so it has good features, has bad features, but what we believe now is that we can kind of so that's why it has this perception that it's very, how to say, it has a lot of bumps in it in the working semantic web. But what our idea is now, that we build a centralized infrastructure, which is called the database, to support decentralization. And that is not uncommon. Underlying the World Wide Web is the internet architecture, which is also hierarchical, decentralized. It's more structured than the decentralized nature of the World Wide Web. And it supports this decentralization with the domain registration and the routing and everything, like large telecommunication industries behind that, yeah, that the internet is working. So we built database kind of like as a platform to connect all these decentralized nodes and do a global view on data management. So that is the new mission of DBpedia, to provide global and unified access to knowledge graphs.
I like that. So, I'm working mostly in the, well, what pertains to this event in a decentralized ecosystem called SecureSkuttlebutt. And the quickest way I can summarize that, if you've seen the session about Solid, is that it's similar in some ways, but we solve some problems by ignoring them. So what I mean is, our VIL, like imagine a social network, and you have a data vault. The data vault lives on your machine, not a machine connected to the network, your personal machine, your laptop, your phone. And it contains all your data. But it also contains all the data of your friends and friends of friends, like 2 levels of replication. So we mimic it like human relationships and friendships. So what you see, we don't have global views. That's a hard problem to solve. So we ignore that. I have a local view of me and my friends and what they are gossiping about their friends. So all our problems are local. They are easy to solve. We don't have consensus. It's eventually consistent. And I can go on for hours about this, and you can feel free to ask me about that later. But the important thing is, we have a working ecosystem with end users, and it's fully decentralized, offline-first platform. We have members living in sailboats in the middle of the Pacific, the Hawaiian jungle, indigenous communities in Brazil, and we can talk to each other. Not in real time, no, but the message eventually arrives. And part of my work is making sure that the current web we have, and my favorite user agent, Firefox, can learn new tricks and participate into this.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those ignorable problems. There's a bunch of issues facing decentralization right now. Do you want to maybe talk about a couple of the biggest ones that you think are facing that area of technology, and then also perhaps how Semantic Web and technologies like it can help?
Yes, of course, because most people doing the decentralization projects that I'm aware of and involved with are 1, not coming from academia, 2, not coming from industry. It's mostly developers who are bored with their startup jobs and trying to do something different. So many of us lack 2 things. We lack the comprehensive stacked knowledge of academia. So we are modeling things usually wrong. For example, on Scuttlebutt, we have an immutable log of data that is registering stuff like you would do with like schema.org microdata, which would be awesome to store and query with all the RDF and Semantic Web goodness. But we don't have that. So we are building, we have the data, but we don't have a way to reason about it. We create clobbered scripts to figure out stuff. But there is a gazillion tools out there to do so. And we are not talking to each other. So in this Venn diagram of code decentralization tech and Semantic Web, I wish it would overlap more.
Sebastian and Ruben, does this sort of mirror some of your perspective on the challenges facing decentralization?
So I'll start in the sense that maybe we come from a different direction, indeed, because my problem with decentralization is apparently we found out we were both at the DWeb Summit last year, and there's about 30 companies doing what I'm doing, but they're all doing it in different ways. And they're doing it in different ways because somewhere down the road they just took arbitrarily different decisions. But that way we're never going to get somewhere. So we need a bigger vision. And the good thing about the Semantic Web is that there is this bigger vision. Like we've thought about many of the problems that one day maybe might happen. So that's a good thing in the sense that there's a lot of things we've thought about. However, there's also many things that we've been overthinking. Some things are too complex indeed. But we should be talking to each other because I've seen it too many times that a new initiative starts out like, bah, the semantic web, it's too complex, you guys are dreaming, and in the end they just end up reinventing the things that they need. So we need a much better understanding. However, the last mile is important, and the last mile in reality is probably 1,000 miles, which is bringing the fundamental concepts and research into practice. It is a very big gap that's not going to be bridged by just waiting. We have to actively talk to each other at conferences like these and see how the problems that we have are in fact already comparable to things that have been solved in the past. But the reconciliation has to come from two sides, otherwise it's never going to work.
Yeah, maybe one aspect that I think both of you are. So the view on this, also on the semantic web, was very production centric. So everybody was thinking about how do I produce this, right? So maybe that's a bit orthogonal to the decentralization, but consumption is really important, right? So data quality is fitness for use. If you don't have users, you don't have data quality per se. You know, so this also comes when you homogenize data, right? So that's also, I see that as a trend that nowadays there are more applications that also on the semantic website that focus on consumers, right? So one of the sponsors here, they provide DBpedia as SQL, so you can query the knowledge graph as SQL, right? Because that's maybe what the consumer wants. So the technology behind that is maybe more hidden, and the effect that the data and the value reaches the consumer is kind of like the important part. Yeah, I wasn't, sorry on your part, I wasn't quite sure how, so your Scuttlebutt only allows you to query a local, or do you have querying? That was the question, because
yeah, we do have querying. We have querying, but you're querying your local data set. A daemon is perpetually running on the machine, peering with others and dragging more data into this data set. So what you have might not be the latest up-to-date data in the world, but eventually you will get that data. But you're always querying your local data set.
The question I have is, so let's say you have 30 users with different environments, would they have the same queries because the data is structured the same way? Or?
Yes, the data is on Scuttlebutt, the data is always structured the same way. It's a loose system, much like Solid, so we are looking at the shape of data as well. So it looks the same. Eventually you have like the wrong shape there and everything breaks. But the important part is that the query doesn't go elsewhere from your machine. The query just reasons about the data you have. And you do have a ton of data if you think in terms of something that was built to mimic human relationships.
Andre, would you address something that Sebastian said about use cases? Talk a little bit about sort of the way you look at the way you've solved problems with Scuttlebutt, but directly from the use cases that required it to be that way. And then I'd love to hear a similar thing from some stuff on Solid.
Can we go back to that question because it was a bit convoluted for me?
Yeah, it's just what Sebastian was saying is that we started to solve problems by trying to address how to produce things, right? How to create a solution. But a lot of the issue that we're facing at the moment in this area is about use cases. It's about how do we understand and pull out value for an end user of some kind. And I imagine Scuttlebutt did that. So I wondered if you could tell some of that story.
So I'll highlight some of our use cases. Scuttlebutt was created by a sailor who lived in a sailboat and wanted to talk to his friends, but he didn't have a reliable connection. That's why Scuttlebutt works offline and reasons about local data only. So first and foremost was a social network, a technology to enable a social network for people that doesn't really have a reliable connection. So I can be flying over the Atlantic with it, and I have a view of the whole network and everything. Not the whole network, but the whole network that my user sees. So I can be liking photos, publishing stuff, commenting on old stuff without the internet. Once I'm back online and I start peering with my friends, my messages start gossiping around the world. So that's one use case. But the one that made it click for me, and this will be quick, I swear. First of all, are you aware there is a Louvre museum in Dubai? Yeah, I wasn't. But they were making an exhibition about old currency. And they would have some screens in the exhibition hall showing photos of the currency. And there are three key players in that story. There's the guy that needs to go to every museum and institute to take photos of the currency. There is the other guy who needs to approve the photos because some photos are crap. And there is someone who needs to put those on the screen. And Scuttlebutt was used for that. The person could be in the middle of an institute in the desert with no connection. Every single photo went into the Scuttlebutt feed. If that person passed by another photographer, Scuttlebutt would gossip and they would exchange pictures with one another. So in the end, they both had all the pictures from each other. Whoever got back to a networked place first was carrying all the photos. When that person was networkally, is that can I use that like that? Sure. Sorry, English is not my first language. So I noted. And was closer to the editor. The photos would arrive at the editor machine where they could approve or not. Each screen on that museum was a Scuttlebutt profile. So as they approved, the screens were doing a query, a perpetual query on approved photos. So as they approved photos, they would go into the screen. That without any backend, any server involved. And that's the use case that I'm like, okay, maybe we can use that for something that's not a social network. And right now we have our own software repositories, we have our own NPM registry, we're hosting more things than it's wise to host on Scuttlebutt, and it's still working. So it's not a theoretical software that we hope one day to get users. No, we already have them.
So I like the idea of use cases, and it's a very good point that indeed producing things is simple, but consuming them and having them consumed is the hard part. And I think there was a very beautiful example. However, at the same time, maybe that's a mistake that we as a Semantic Web community have made too much, because people call this a solution and search for a problem. So then we started to make our own problems, and we started bringing it to the end users. But let's be honest, I'll just talk about myself. I have no idea what people want. I don't interact enough with people. I'm a computer scientist, obviously. And this is why the enabling part is for me really important. What I want to do is enable others who understand people way better than I do to build things. And it's not something we're going to solve with computer scientists. We need designers. We need artists. We need people who think very differently than we do. Instead of trying to bring to people, we need to enable others to bring it to people because they're way better at it than we are. So I think our primary job is to first target them, and only through them start targeting the end use cases. But of course, if there's nice cases along the way, why not take them?
Okay. Ruben, you mentioned this in your talk, and it's come up earlier in the day as you mentioned. The semantic web stack is often, its main criticism leveled against it is how complex it is. Would you like to speak maybe a little bit quickly to whether it is actually that complex, and then if it is, what are some of the ways that we can start to combat that? And then Sebastian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this afterwards as well.
It is conceptually very simple, but the problems are complex. That was a point that I made in my talk as well. However, the thing is that a lot of the complexity that is present in the semantic web stack is simply not used. So at the moment, it is unnecessary complexity. Let me give a small example. The system that we're building with Solid, let's say that we're building a social network. Well, you can do this much easier. Just agree on what a person looks like, or what a comment looks like, or what a post looks like, and a photo, and you're done. That's the easiest way to make it work. But what if you disagree? What if everyone has their own definition of people and pictures? And what if you want to use it for hotels to do Airbnb or have rides and make an Uber and so on? So this is where the simple model breaks down. So the semantic web stack is anticipating problems that frankly only start arising today. Like we are prepared, or we have a technology stack that is so complex because the problems that we're tackling are of a very different nature. So as if you're not tackling such complex problems, of course this stack is too complex. You can use much more simpler things, absolutely. But the moment that you cannot rely on central agreements, that people will do different things, and you have so many unknowns and degrees of freedom, this is when the complexity of the stack works in your advantage, because it affords doing more complex things than simpler stacks that were great for simpler problems, but not for the more complex ones.
So, okay, let me say it like this. So, if you are a user of the Semantic Web, then I'm not sure you should look at the stack because it doesn't provide any solutions. In fact, it provides a conceptual model. The thing is that just because you want it to be easier, complexity also doesn't go away. So you have to kind of like deal with it. I'm not sure that the hardcore, so let's say the hardcore complexity of the Semantic Web is definitely necessary to solve some things. And I think this part, which is complex, should be tackled by some sort of platform. So the thing that we have right now is that if you look at the open data landscape, for example, all right, so and I'm talking about compatible data, massive compatible data. First, you cannot find it, but it's there. You have to go to websites and discover it. It's very tedious. And then if you look at all the libraries, for example, they really curate the same kind of open data. Then I also talk to libraries a lot. I asked them where they got their links from, and then they forgot where they copied them from, right? So there's no management in this part, and they're all struggling with this. But this is a good part where this complexity can be centralized in a platform way, right? So there's an infrastructure that helps you align your decentralized offering. And that is, I think that is a solution that could be workable for the Semantic Web in the future, that there are centralized points, DBpedia of course, yeah, I'm talking for DBpedia here, that we kind of like help reducing the complexity by taking the load and centralizing the work there, right, in data management.
How hard is that, both for your app and for other apps that are trying to build on this stack? And then I might get everyone's opinion around how we can help this technology stack to be sustainable for apps that are trying to build it across their use cases.
Well, so basically the core things are very complex, I think. Like you need to cluster the links, connected component, you need to do the ontology mapping, inference, basically the whole Semantic Web stack, right? So you need to use all the tools there. Also continuous integration, lots of things. But once the data then gets exported again and goes into databases or applications, then it reaches the user, and there comes the simplicity, right? But it's kind of like the complexity goes down from the Semantic Web stack, the core, over the applications and the databases to the applications to the users, right? Where just the data is displayed. And maybe feedback can be given, yeah? But the global management behind it, yeah, this needs to be properly resourced, supported, and maintained.
Do you have thoughts about who should be doing that work?
Well, the database the database has a platform economy to do that, right? So in the end, it is not fully implemented yet. It's still a bit of a vision, so we are improving feature by feature. Yeah, the core is stable based on the DCAT vocabulary, but in the sense, if the platform economy provides the right incentive, it should work. You know, like GitHub, Facebook, or all of them, they're sustainable in the core, right?
Yeah, I thought a while about that question, and the thing I came to realize is that my answer is divided in two parts. Not answer, I don't have the answer. My commentary. I'm not providing value. I'm asking more questions. Okay. So there is the mental model and the theory behind it and all the things about the semantic web that I think they are complex. Not unnecessarily complex, it's a hard problem. And if someone like a web developer like me goes through the trouble of learning all that and starts implementing that on the data they are placing online, what value does they get from it? What is given back? What's the incentive? I know there is one, but the message is not clear. And the other side of this, because people are like, oh, annotate everything because SEO. Sorry, that's not enough. And the other side of the commentary is that I've walked the aisles here and there are some amazing products. But everything I saw requires a data center. I'm working decentralization, which is moving everything to the edge. We have core developers on Raspberry Pis. Tell me how a Raspberry Pi will reason about things. So where are the tools for the small user? Where is the Excel for the semantic web? Something that, hey, here's a local piece of data. Let me reason about it. I don't want to work on the billions of triples scale. I don't have that many cat photos on my machine. But I do want to reason about the stuff I do. And I don't find, one, the tools for the end user or the small user. And I'm having trouble finding what plays well with free software. Because if we're trying to connect the disconnected and provide value to the whole world cannot afford that kind of solution. Like e-government and healthcare, they can't afford anything. Small independent developer living on a sailboat, how can they play in this stuff?
Yeah, okay. I think your use case is valid, but let's say you want to build a localized Siri for the data, right? This is not going to happen without any contextual knowledge, right? So there needs to be, question answering over DBpedia is like a very common sport in academia. There are lots of chatbots and stuff like that. So maybe 1,000 papers have been written about this. But in the end, you need something like a good database with lexical information, facts that are answered, and this needs to be imported somehow and connected on the local device, right? And that's when you need something more than a local context. I'm not saying your use case or your approach is not valid, but I think you need both, right? If you want to have good applications then. And only one other person, let's say a developer team, open source, needs to build the Siri and then it can be deployed and there's the value, right? So
I agree with both of you in the sense that, yes, it's a valid question, but yes, we need both. However, let's be honest, we are very good at big data. Everyone out there, big data, we've got it covered. We're very bad at small data. Small data is the harder challenge. Because if you have big data, you have lots of context to make derivations. But if you only have 5 or 100 facts, then it's really hard to derive stuff. So the reason why your question is an open question is because we're not focusing enough on small data. Small data is the hard problem, and are the kind of problems that I'm very interested to tackle.
I don't want to tackle, I want the solution only. I want to use it.
I want to tackle them as a researcher, so I'm doing that for you.
Yeah, my approach, my saying was that in order to tackle the small data problem, it might be that we need to deroute over big data patterns and large-scale analysis. You know, like you need a good lexicographical database to analyze local small data, for example.
Not contradicting any of that, but we shouldn't think that our solutions for big data will work for small data. We'll need them both, but I think they're completely different stacks.
It's also worth noticing that linked data across networks, with decentralization, the network is always unreliable and not necessarily you can trust what's there. So this adds complexity to all this reasoning. And what I think even like I know that to derive, like, we have different standards for meaningful value. So when you mean value, you are meaning something much more valuable than when I mean value, because I'm trying to infer really easy stuff. But the key thing for me is that the small data is useful and applicable to small users. Like, we are not providing, like, the semantic web is not providing value for someone who likes cat pictures right now. Like, they have a whole set of pictures in their machine, and they want to, without uploading all their photos to Facebook, they want to find all the tabby cats. Or when they took that photo, like, in some country. Like, there is a lot of data stored there, but can we infer not as high value as all the ontological stuff we know? You do, and I don't. But maybe the small stuff might be easier to grasp, but I couldn't find anyone in the booths exploring this kind of stuff. Maybe it's not even a problem and I'm imagining things.
Yeah, no, it's true, but where does then the intelligence come from, right? So you have the cat pictures, it's cool, you can share them, post them, or decentralize, but then who's going, let's say you have 1 million of them or 10 million, who's going to analyze them, you know, and sort them for you?
And that plays with the first part of what I commented about annotation. I don't need intelligence if it's annotated. For example, if all that data has microdata in it, it's very easy to find which are the cats when compared to using visual recognition to figure out with neural networks, oh, this is actually a cat.
But annotation doesn't really work, right? So you have the keyword problem. We have certain problems with annotations.
Annotations.
That's why we have these better than human,
Yeah.
better than human AI now.
Annotations work better than no annotation at all. If all you have is your machine.
Interesting. I want to thank you all for your time. So Andre and Sebastian and Ruben, we've got a lot of time to continue this conversation, I hope, over sort of the conclusion to the talk out there. And if any of you guys have any questions from the audience, we'd love to hear them, but I think maybe we'll wrap the formal proceedings up now and then we'll take it to the informal proceeding
There's time
after.
for a couple of questions from the
Is
audience.
there? Good, okay.
Yeah. If anybody has any, that is.
Thank you. Okay, so I am excited about the vision behind Solid. So I have my own Solid pod. I'm trying to experiment a lot, so I might have a few questions for you. But when talking about it with other people, there's a common criticism that I get is in the shape of, let's say, it's all nice when you're, let's say, tech savvy and you can, let's say, host your own server, you can take care about security, you can take care about scalability and so on. But let's say you're not able to do that, so you have to trust the, let's say, Solid community website to set a server for you. Or an app that will get access to your own data and they will, let's say, keep the data for many people for, let's say, caching purposes. So doesn't this kind of not defeat, but go against the concept of decentralization? Because it becomes something like, well, I know that I have to use the Solid community website. What if it goes down? I don't really know what these people are doing with my data because it's hosted on their own systems. So, I mean, as myself, I know I can trust it. But what would you say related to this?
There's many answers. I'll give you one, just to open our minds. So I've been having interesting conversations with governments across Europe. Specifically, the Belgian government is thinking about it like this. We as Belgian citizens every year get an amount of free water, gas, electricity above whatever else we consume. And they see data as a human right. So they're like, why don't we give our citizens an allowance in a secure place? But here's the kicker. The government's not going to say, we're going to host your data, because maybe in Europe we trust this, otherwise we might not. But they say, no, just like with the water, gas, electricity, you can pick a provider of your choice that is certified. We'll give you the allowance right there. So there is a role for governments, for instance, here in this sphere to create trusted places for people where they can store their data.
Can I comment on that as well? Because that's a problem that we spent some time on Scuttlebutt. All your data is local. So who's hosting your data? You. But all your friends are also hosting your data. Our main motto is your friends are the data center. So if your machine breaks, you can reconstruct all your data from your friends. And that completely bypasses the I need to have a server, be tech savvy or anything. We have a desktop app. So just run it. And that's one of the parts that in our ecosystem is quite easy. We have other parts that are complex and some parts that we will not be able to solve. But for that, we decided that it's safer if it's with you, and it's safer if it's with the people you trust, which are your friends. So that's how you're doing it. And maybe it works for Solid. Maybe you can have like a data vault on your machine, and your friends can have copies of it. And then if something goes down, you can still rebuild it. Why not?
What about the dyn DNS solution? Dynamic DNS?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can host it on your machine.
Right.
Right?
Then what happens when you don't want your data to be available anymore?
Kick the computer.
Okay, but then your friends have your data now.
Yeah.
Or let's say a cache has your data. How do you retract your data? How can you trust the fact that your data? You can't.
Just a small note here, we have to distinguish between the technical and the legal. There's some things we can solve with technology. We have to know our limitations. In this case, if someone has a copy, you don't want it, we can solve this technically, it's a legal matter. These things are important. It's much more than just technology.
Yeah. In our case, we can't solve that.
Yeah.
It's there forever.
Hi, just on Solid again. So that reminds me of something I've been thinking about is, as you're defining standards for Solid, does that include ways that I would migrate my pod and, codes of ethics for, if I migrate my pod off your server because I've, don't like your hosting service anymore, are there any obligations that are set out in the Solid's system of standards that say, these are the things you must do when somebody migrates. You must make sure that the migration has completed successfully and is reliable, and then you must, scourge your system of any remnants of the data. Is that part of what Solid aims to do, to give guidance to what is good practice and good ethics as well?
So we can indeed, on these matters, we can give guidance. However, this is again a separation between the technical and the legal. Like, what we'll focus on is making sure that the migration can happen technically, right? But what you're talking about is, and okay, once I'm migrated, are they going to delete stuff and so on? Again, this is a legal matter, and here's why. Some countries will oblige you to delete everything. Some will oblige you to keep a copy. So these are things that we can't really have a say in. We can have best practices and suggestions, but this is not legally enforceable. So we really have to know our limitations there again. Our job is to make it technically possible to do the move.
And will there be a standard way of activating such a migration, or is that kind of, it's just the fact that they're kind of compatible, so that in theory they can go, or you're going to prescribe the way in which I request the migration to take place?
Yeah, that would be part of standardization. You can just do it by copying yourself, but this will be such a common case that we probably want procedures for that, so yes.
Okay, I think we've covered. There's another question. Okay, last one. Seriously.
Sorry, on Solid again. One of the examples you used was on social networks and having a plethora of different providers that everybody could use. Your grandmother could use a different social network to you. Surely in that example, for your grandmother's data to be released to the service provider that you're using, she would have to allow that. And does that not create a system where everybody's having to have your friends list? You've got 500 friends on Facebook. 500 people have got to allow you to now have that data. And does that not would that not create negligence on the consumer's part that would allow for something like Cambridge Analytica?
This is again a question where it's a bit about the legal and technical. However, the basic principle is that you can restrict very precisely what you want others to see. Now here's the thing, by the way, so don't expect that you will be seeing like tens of consent dialogues every day. There's going to be a couple of sensible defaults which you can pick from, but if you want to be in control, you can be in control of every single access. However, suppose you have a bad actor in the system, says, well, let's say I'm a Spotify clone, but in order to play music, I have to see all your likes, and not just your music, I want to see your political preferences and how much money you make and so on and so forth. Well, the option is you can actually lie. This is something you can do today. You cannot say with your Facebook account, like, this is my real account, but here are my fake likes. But if you control your data space, if an application asks for too much, just give it fake data automatically. And just the fact that this is possible shows that the dynamics are completely going to change. Because if people can give fake data, the value of having your data in the first place goes down. So I think we'll see interesting effects like these, which just make it way less attractive to start harvesting people's data.
Okay, so yeah, this time it's really the end. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all. And as this is actually the last session of the day, well, I'm supposed to give something like a closing note. Not much to say, just again a big thanks, and well, hope to see you all next year, and we are already making plans. Yes.